right, everyone, get ready to dive deep because today we're cracking open the intriguing world of Linux services.
We're talking about those digital engines that power so much of what we do online.
And we're going to see how these everyday tools can become powerful resources in the hands of a skilled hacker.
That's right. We're using Linux Basics for Hackers as our guide today, specifically pages 159 to 176.
So if you've got your copy handy, grab it and let's get started.
These pages are really fascinating because they illustrate how a small shift in perspective can reveal the hidden potential of these core services.
It's not about becoming hackers overnight, but more about understanding their mindset, their approach, right?
Absolutely. It's about understanding how these systems work so you can better protect yourself and your own systems.
Makes sense. Today we're taking a closer look at four key sources: Apache, OpenSSH, MySQL, MariaDB, and PostgreSQL. So let's start with the basics. What exactly are Linux services?
Think of them like the behind-the-scenes crew of a play. You see the actors on stage, but it's the stagehands, lighting technicians, and sound engineers who make everything come together.
So in this analogy, the website or the application we're using is like the actors, and the services are working behind the scenes to make sure everything runs smoothly.
Precisely. In Linux, these services are software programs that run in the background, enabling everything from web browsing to secure file transfers.
Okay, they're essential, but we're approaching them a bit differently today, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about command line access.
You got it. The command line gives us a level of control that most users never even realize is possible. It's like knowing how to drive a car versus understanding how to take the engine apart and put it back together.
And I'm guessing that's why hackers love the command line. It's about getting under the hood, understanding the mechanics, the nuts and bolts of how these systems operate.
Exactly. And that understanding can be used for good or, unfortunately, for less than noble purposes.
It's a little unsettling,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that's why we're here to shed some light on those darker corners. So let's jump into our first service, Apache. I know it's related to websites, but just how big are we talking here?
We're talking about a huge chunk of the internet. Apache powers a staggering number of websites, over 55%, in fact. That's everything from your favorite online shopping sites to news outlets and everything in between.
Over half the internet. Wow, I can see why that would be a tempting target for anyone looking to make a big impact. But how does something designed to power websites become a tool for hackers?
It comes down to vulnerabilities. Even the most well-maintained software can have weaknesses.
And hackers exploit these vulnerabilities to gain unauthorized access.
Exactly. Our book even provides a simple example of building a website called Hackers Arise, just to illustrate how these vulnerabilities work.
So something as simple as building a basic website could hold the keys to potentially compromising a system.
It can. And it highlights the importance of understanding how these vulnerabilities can be exploited. Take cross-site scripting or XSS, for example.
XSS, that's where a hacker injects malicious code into a legitimate website.
Right. So you could be browsing a trusted online store and suddenly, without realizing it, have your login credentials stolen.
Okay, that is scary stuff. It really highlights why Apache's popularity also makes it such a prime target. It's fascinating, really, how something designed for good can be twisted for malicious purposes.
It's a recurring theme in cybersecurity. Knowledge can be used to build amazing things or to break them down, just like our next service, OpenSSH.
OpenSSH, that's all about secure connections, right? So how does it fit into this hacker's toolkit we're building?
On the surface, OpenSSH seems pretty harmless. It's mostly used for secure remote access, which is essential for system administrators who need to manage computers from afar.
Right, sounds practical, but I sense a but coming.
Of course there's a but. See, if OpenSSH allows you to control a computer remotely, well, a hacker who gains access can do the same thing.
So it becomes a backdoor into the system.
Precisely.
Right.
And that's where things get really interesting. Linux Basics for Hackers even has a project that demonstrates this concept, the Raspberry Pi.
Wait, are we talking about those little DIY computers that people use for everything from home automation to building robots? What do those have to do with hacking? A Raspberry Pi that spies. Okay, now you got to tell me more about this project.
Just imagine, you set up a Raspberry Pi with a camera, hide it in plain sight. Then, using OpenSSH, you can access that device remotely from anywhere. Boom, DIY surveillance camera.
Okay, that's both really clever and kind of creepy at the same time.
Yeah.
But it is incredible how easily something so seemingly innocent can be, well, repurposed. Although I have to say, the tech side of me is impressed.
It really does show the power of these tools. But let's change gears a bit and talk about where the real treasure is often buried data. Which brings us to MySQL and MariaDB, two of the most common database systems in use.
Data, it's the real currency of the digital world these days.
Yeah,
And these databases are where it's all stored.
that's right. Think about all the websites you use where you have to create an account, social media platforms, online stores, even banking apps. Most of those rely on databases like MySQL and MariaDB to store user info.
So usernames, passwords, credit card details, it's all just sitting in these databases.
Yep, meticulously organized and stored. From a hacker's perspective, they're a gold mine. The book actually gives an example. It's a little simplified, but it illustrates the point perfectly. Picture a database called credit card numbers.
Subtle, but I get the point. So how would hackers even begin to get into these databases?
The key is SQL, or Structured Query Language. It's basically the language used to talk to databases, retrieve and mess with the data. Linux Basics for Hackers actually goes over some basic SQL commands, enough to show you the power and the potential danger of even just basic knowledge.
So with a little SQL knowledge, someone could potentially get their hands on this really sensitive information.
It's possible, yes. Imagine a hacker injecting a carefully crafted SQL command, say, into a website search bar. If they do it right, they can trick the database into revealing information it shouldn't. This is kind of a simplified example of what's known as an SQL injection attack.
Wow, those data breach headlines are starting to make a lot more sense now. Learning about all this is fascinating, but also a bit unsettling, It's like we're peeking behind the curtain of the digital world and realizing just how vulnerable it all really is.
It's a necessary reality check for sure, but the more you understand these systems, the more you appreciate the importance of cybersecurity. It's a constant arms race between the folks protecting data and those trying to get their hands on it.
True. And speaking of important systems, let's move on to our final service, PostgreSQL. This one seems like a real workhorse, even on these heavy hitters. What makes PostgreSQL stand out?
PostgreSQL doesn't always get the spotlight, but it's a popular choice for those really big, large-scale applications. Think platforms handling tons of data and user traffic, constantly processing requests, that sort of thing. Its robustness and scalability make it a perfect fit for one particularly interesting tool, Metasploit.
Metasploit. That rings a bell. Refresh my memory, though.
Picture a hacker's dream toolkit, and that's Metasploit in a nutshell. It's what we call a penetration testing framework. Basically, it's a bunch of tools and exploits that security experts use to find and test vulnerabilities in systems.
So ethical hackers use it to find weaknesses and fix them before, well, someone with bad intentions can exploit them.
Exactly. But of course, that same toolkit can be used for, shall we say, less than ethical purposes.
And PostgreSQL is what makes this Metasploit toolkit work.
You could say it's the backbone. Metasploit uses PostgreSQL to store everything, its modules, scan results, you name it. Without PostgreSQL, Metasploit wouldn't function.
So to truly grasp Metasploit, we need to understand PostgreSQL. It's like we're peeling back the layers of an onion, going deeper and deeper into these systems.
And we're just scratching the surface. Linux Basics for Hackers gives us a glimpse into these tools and techniques, enough to get us curious and maybe inspire us to dig a little deeper on our own.
My curiosity is definitely piqued. It's amazing how much complexity is hidden beneath the surface of our digital world. We've gone from building basic websites to remotely controlling cameras to diving into the world of databases. It's clear these Linux services are more than just lines of code. They're the building blocks of the modern internet, for better or worse.
Exactly. And understanding how they work, both on their own and as part of this larger ecosystem, is essential, whether you're building the next big tech innovation or just trying to navigate the digital world safely.
I feel like we've taken a trip into the Matrix. Seeing these tools that we use every day from a hacker's point of view really makes you realize how much we just take for granted when we're online.
It's easy to forget all the complex stuff happening behind the scenes, isn't it? But that's kind of the point, right? It's a testament to how well designed these systems are. Of course, it also shows why understanding the vulnerabilities is so important.
Absolutely. But before we wrap things up, let's bring this back to our listeners. For the folks out there who aren't planning on becoming hackers, why does all of this matter? Why should they care about Linux services and vulnerabilities and how this digital world actually works?
It really comes down to this knowledge is power, especially in a digital age like ours. When you understand these foundational services, it helps demystify the technology we all use every day.
So it's less about becoming cybersecurity experts and more about becoming more digitally literate, right?
Exactly. It's about asking the right questions, being aware of potential dangers, and making smart decisions about your own online security.
I mean, we saw how easily something like OpenSSH, which is designed for secure access, can be manipulated. It reminds us that even the most secure systems have their weak points.
And that weak point is often just a lack of awareness. Whether it's spotting a phishing attempt or understanding what happens in a data breach, the more you know, the better equipped you are to navigate the digital world safely.
So, Linux Basics for Hackers. It's not just a how-to guide for hackers, is it? It's like a crash course in digital literacy, a behind-the-scenes look at how the internet really works.
Exactly. It's about understanding not just what's happening, but how and why. And as we've seen today, even a basic understanding of these Linux services can completely change the way you see the digital world.
It's like we've unlocked a secret level. We've covered so much from Apache powering websites to its vulnerabilities, from OpenSSH for remote access to building a DIY spy cam, from MySQL and MariaDB databases to SQL injection, and finally PostgreSQL, which powers Metasploit. That's quite a journey.
And it's just the beginning. Linux Basics for Hackers lays the groundwork and encourages us to explore these areas even further.
And that's what we hope we've sparked in our listeners today, a curiosity to learn more and explore the endless possibilities of technology. Remember, every line of code, every service, every vulnerability has a story behind it. And it's up to us to learn how to read those stories, understand them, and use that knowledge to create a safer and more secure digital future.
Well said. So as you continue exploring the digital world, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, never stop learning.
And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into the world of Linux services. Until next time, happy exploring, everyone.